The sun was barely up, a pale light spilling over the road outside Fallujah. Engines hummed. Dust drifted behind the convoy. It felt like any other patrol. Then the ground shook. Mortars slammed in. RPGs cut across the sky. Machine guns stitched the air with fire. In seconds, the road became a trap, an open grave with no cover, no retreat. Every instinct screamed to stop, but stopping meant dying. He was not the kid who once stumbled through life in New York. The Corps had burned that boy away, replacing him with a Marine forged in discipline and brotherhood. Years of training had taught him to move forward no matter the cost. That morning, he led his brothers straight into the trench, fighting weapon to weapon, switching rifles, pistols, enemy AKs, anything that kept them alive. And when there was only one bullet left, he put it where it mattered. This is not just about the fight that day. It's about the road that led him there. Through mistakes, redemption, and the kind of bond that makes a man run into fire for the one beside him.
What does it take to run straight into a wall of gunfire and live to tell about it? Is it skill? Training? Or is it something deeper? Something in your gut that says not today? I found out in the dusty heart of Iraq. 1 second, my convoy was rolling down a quiet road under a pale morning sun. The next, mortars slammed into the dirt beside us. RPGs screamed across the road. Machine guns ripped the air apart. We had rolled straight into a kill zone, built to erase us. There wasn't time to think. No time to weigh the odds. I grabbed my rifle, looked at my driver, and said, "Let's go." Sevens. We bailed out and charged straight into the enemy trench, cutting them down one by one. When my rifle ran dry, I grabbed another. Then my pistol. Then an AK-47 off the ground. I kept moving, kept shooting, until the ambush shattered and the survivors ran. By the time it was over, more than 20 enemy fighters were gone. But this isn't just about that day. It's about the years before. Me, lost in bad choices, told by a recruiter I wasn't what they were looking for. It's about boot camp breaking me down and building me into a Marine. It's about the brotherhood that carried me through war. And it's about what came after. The quiet battles, the memories I couldn't shake, the friends I couldn't save. Because courage under fire is one thing, finding it again when you're alone in the dark. So, that's the fight nobody prepares you for. I didn't grow up dreaming about the military. My childhood in suburban Western New York was about as ordinary as it gets. School, sports, a little mischief. The truth is, I was drifting. After high school, I barely scraped through community college before dropping out. I partied too much, got into trouble, wrecked cars, and ended up in front of a judge who made it plain. Sevens. Son, you're headed for juvenile detention. Phil, unless you start thinking about the military. That was my wake-up call. I walked into an Air Force recruiting office thinking maybe this was my ticket out. They took one look at me and said, "You're not what we're looking for." Sevens. I remember that sting, the way it hit me in the chest. As I walked out, a stocky, bald Marine with muscles packed into his uniform stopped me. "Hey, young man, what's your story?" Sevens. 5 minutes later, I was sitting in his office hearing about infantry, parachuting, running through the woods with a rifle. It sounded like the adventure I didn't know I needed. I told him about my legal trouble, He grinned and said, "We'll handle it." No, 9 days after signing the papers, I stepped off the bus at Paris Island, my boots hitting those yellow footprints. Drill instructors were in my face, screaming, but I'd grown up being yelled at. Boot camp wasn't a shock, it was a challenge. By the end, I graduated honor recruit. That meant something. It meant for the first time in years, I wasn't a screw-up. The course didn't just teach me how to shoot or march. It tore down the reckless kid I was and rebuilt me with pride, discipline, and a sense of belonging. They taught me the names of legends, Chesty Puller, John Basilone, and made me believe I was responsible for living up to them. That legacy dug deep into me. From Iceland to officer school, my career started climbing. I was learning to lead, to train, to push myself and others harder than we thought possible. But none of that, not boot camp, not the promotions, could prepare me for what was coming in Iraq. Because in war, all the speeches and training boil down to seconds. Seconds when you decide whether to freeze or to move forward. And on one dusty road outside Fallujah, I was about to find out exactly who I had become. By the time Iraq came, I'd been in the Corps long enough to feel confident, maybe too confident. After 9/11, the entire atmosphere changed. We trained harder, drilled longer, and pushed each other until exhaustion became routine. Every Marine in my platoon knew the stakes. We weren't just going overseas, we were stepping into history. When the invasion order came, my platoon was assigned as the lead vehicle element. That's not a job you take lightly. If there's an ambush, you're the first to find it. If there's a mine, you're the first to hit it. We rolled through the breach that night, tanks ahead of us pounding the earth, tracer rounds cutting the darkness. I remember thinking, not for the first time, that we might be driving straight into our own deaths. Our first engagement came just after dawn. It was almost surreal. Shots fired, men moving, prisoners taken, and somehow, no casualties. It lulled some of the guys into a dangerous mindset. Maybe this wouldn't be as bad as we'd feared. But deep down, I knew better. War doesn't hand you victories without asking for payment later. The weeks that followed blurred into a cycle of patrols, firefights, and waiting for the next order. We lived in fighting holes, ate when we could, and tried to snatch sleep in the noise of engines and distant gunfire. Every time we mounted up, I scanned the terrain for signs, disturbed dirt, unnatural shapes, anything that could mean danger. Most days, nothing happened, and that's what made it worse. The quiet built pressure in your chest, wound you up tighter and tighter. Then came that morning outside Fallujah. It was early, light just starting to crawl across the road. I was in the lead again, scanning ahead. Something about the terrain bothered me. The road curved toward a berm, narrowing between an irrigation ditch and a rise of dirt. Perfect place for an ambush. I remember saying over the radio, "Eyes up. This is bad ground." Right. Moments later, the tanks called it in. A truck ahead, men dismounting with weapons. Then everything erupted at once. Mortars slammed into the roadside. RPGs hissed across the pavement, skipping like stones. Gunfire poured in from the berm. It was a textbook kill zone, and we were in the center of it. I yelled at my driver to push through, but the tanks had halted up ahead, blocking the road. We were trapped between them and the enemy, the air thick with dust and the metallic taste of adrenaline flooding my mouth. Somewhere in the chaos, one of our vehicles took a direct RPG hit. The radio exploded with the call, "Doc Johnson's dead." My hands tightened on my rifle. I knew in that moment we had only two choices: stay put and die, or move forward into the teeth of it. And moving forward meant doing something no sane person would consider. We were about to take the fight directly into their trench. The berm ahead looked like nothing, just a low ridge of dirt. But I'd learned to see what others missed. A slight dip in its shape, a shadow that didn't match the rest. Those were signs. There was a machine gun nest up there, and it had the perfect angle to cut us apart. I leaned forward, pointed. "Right there," I told Armand, my driver. "Ram it." "Sevens." He didn't even hesitate. The engine roared, suspension bucking as we slammed into the berm. Metal screeched, dirt collapsed, and the vehicle lurched to a stop halfway into the trench line. Before the dust even settled, I grabbed the rifle from the rack and jumped out. "Let's go!" I shouted. Armand looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but there wasn't time to explain. I hit the trench running, boots sinking into the loose dirt. Behind me, Kerman saw me moving and vaulted off the vehicle, following without question. That's what brotherhood is. You don't ask why, you just go. The enemy was everywhere. Some were scrambling out of the trench, trying to run. Others were dropping down from the berm, charging toward us. I fired until my rifle clicked empty, tossed it to Kerman, and grabbed his. Kept moving. Every step forward was through smoke and shouting, the air filled with the ripping sound of gunfire. Armand caught up, moving on my flank, shooting into the enemy coming down on us from the right. When his rifle went dry, he switched to his pistol. I did the same when mine ran out. Then the pistols ran empty too. In that moment, all the noise seemed to narrow into one sound, my own breathing. I scanned the ground and saw an AK lying in the dirt. Picked it up, racked the bolt, kept going. Ran it empty. Found another. We fought like that, weapon to weapon, round to round, until the trench ahead began to thin of movement. We'd pushed far enough that geometry started working against us. Friendly fire was a real risk now. I turned to Armin. "We're going back," I said. He looked confused, but followed as I retraced our steps up the trench. Halfway back, Armand spotted movement. A fighter, still alive, clutching a grenade. "Shoot him!" I barked. "I'm dry," he shouted. "So am I." That's when I saw it. A single 5.56 round on the ground, glinting in the dust. I bent, grabbed it, slammed it into my rifle, and fired. The grenade slipped from his hand as he dropped. When we climbed out of the trench, the fight had shifted. Most of the enemy was breaking, running for cover or disappearing into the fields. The volume of fire had dropped to scattered bursts. For the first time since it started, I could think. That's when I heard Cordy on the radio. "Sir, I've got 2 prisoners." Sevens. Instinct and adrenaline had me reaching for my pistol, intent clear. But my holster was empty, and in that pause, reality hit. If I'd had a loaded weapon, I might have done something I could never take back. Then I saw Corporal Cano. He was holding his own guts in, blood soaking through his uniform. The RPG that killed Doc Johnson had torn him open too. I didn't think he'd make it. But there was no time for grief. The tanks up ahead were still in contact, and we had to get to them. We loaded up, drove forward, and the fight rolled on. But the trench, the grenade, and the single round, that stayed with me. Because in the middle of all that chaos, one decision, one bullet, could have changed everything. We pushed forward toward the tanks, engines grinding, the smell of cordite and burning fuel hanging heavy in the air. The chatter on the radio was pure chaos. Overlapping voices, contact reports, gunfire bleeding through open mics. I could hear the tanks up ahead hammering their main guns, each blast a deep concussion that shook through the armor of our vehicle. When we crested a rise, the scene snapped into view. The tanks were dug in along the road, trading fire with entrenched enemy positions across the fields. Tracer rounds stitched the air, mortars thumped, and RPGs arced in lazy but deadly curves. One slammed into the dirt not 20 meters from us, spraying rocks against the hull. I told Armand to pull up alongside the lead tank. The second we stopped, I was out of the vehicle, rifle in hand, scanning for threats. It felt like every shadow held a muzzle, every movement a threat. The call came for a push, tanks leading, our vehicles screening the flanks. As we rolled forward, I saw a figure pop up from a ditch on our right. Before I could shoulder my rifle, Thomas on the .50 cal cut him down, brass raining over the roof. The adrenaline had been building all morning, but now it peaked. Pure tunnel vision. Every sound was sharper, every movement slowed just enough for me to react. A burst of AK fire tore past my head, the rounds snapping like angry hornets. I dropped into the dirt, rolled, and sent 3 controlled shots back. The man dropped, his rifle tumbling from his hands. The fight collapsed into a series of short, violent bursts. Enemy fighters trying to break contact, us hunting them down. We cleared a cluster of ruined buildings, room by room. In one, a man burst from behind a doorway, rifle raised. We were less than 10 feet apart. Instinct took over. I fired from the hip, felt the recoil slam into my shoulder, watched him crumple. By the time the shooting died down, my uniform was soaked with sweat, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer overload of everything my body had just pushed through. We'd taken ground. We'd survived. But the cost was all around us. Doc Johnson was gone. Kano was clinging to life. And scattered across the dirt and trenches were the bodies of the men who tried to kill us and failed. Standing there, rifle hanging from its sling, I remember thinking this was it. This was the moment every Marine wonders about, when you're tested, when you find out if you can do what's required. I had. We all had. But in that moment of victory, there was no celebration, only the quiet weight of knowing that for some, this day was the last one they'd ever see. When the last shots faded, the silence felt heavier than the gunfire. We stood there in the heat, weapons low, hearts still pounding, each of us taking in the scene. The air reeked of spent powder, diesel, and blood. Victory? Maybe on paper. But standing among the wreckage, it didn't feel like winning. I kept looking for Doc Johnson, half expecting him to appear with that calm, unshakable presence he always carried. But he was gone. So was the easy laugh he brought to the worst days. Kano was on a stretcher, pale and motionless, every bump in the road back to the medevac making me wonder if he'd survive. That night, lying in the dirt with my rifle across my chest, I couldn't stop replaying the moments, the flash of the RPG, the trench fight, the split-second decisions. We'd lived because we acted without hesitation. But I couldn't ignore the truth. We'd also lived because some of us had paid a price the rest never would. Years later, I'd stand on a quiet hill, the names of friends etched into stone. No roaring guns, no shouted orders, just wind in the grass and the weight of memory. The medal they pinned on my chest sits in a box now. It doesn't bring them back. It doesn't balance the scales. What it does is remind me of who I was in that moment, of the men beside me, of the choice we all made, to step forward when it would have been easier to stop. And maybe that's the only thing worth carrying from that day. Not the killing, not the fear, but the brotherhood that made each of us willing to face the fire for the man next to us.